That was the War on Drugs live in studio at 88.1 KDHX. Independent Music Plays here. Thanks a lot for coming in, guys. Taking some time out of your busy touring schedule.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're talking here to Adam Gronowski. And can you introduce the band a little bit? Tell us who's in
On the drums, we got Steven Ergo.
Hello.
Dave Hartley on the bass. Robbie Ben on the guitar.
Right on. And so this lineup, you guys have been around for a while, but the lineup has been in flux pretty much throughout the band's existence. Is this a fairly stable incarnation of the group?
I like to think so, yeah.
You like to think so. That's the hope, right?
I hope so.
And when it started out, it was essentially you and Kurt. Is that correct?
Not entirely true.
Not entirely.
But there was about, when it first started, there was about seven people in the band.
Okay.
There was two drummers who hated each other, and then there was another guy who played guitar, if I remember, and then there was a horn player, and then there was actually someone who played the octagon.
Okay.
And the octagon broke, and so he
So he
naturally left the band.
Yeah,
because he had nothing
he's
to
got
do.
nothing to do, right?
Yeah.
So the songwriting duties throughout the history of the band there, since you've been the one sort of anchor there, is that been primarily your responsibility that's been driven by your writing and so forth?
Most definitely.
And musically, though, I guess the records sound, they each have a little bit of a distinct feel, especially the most recent one, Future Weather, which came out last year at the end of the year, is a little bit more ambience. There's a lot more space, a lot more layering of the melodies and so forth from Wagon Wheel Blues. Does that have more to do with like an intentional sidestep or a change in personnel or just what you wanted to do with
I
the
would
songs?
say Wagon Wheel Blues is pretty dense.
It is. There's more. Yeah, exactly. Like I said.
I mean, track count wise, there's more tracks on Future Weather. I mean, we could spend a whole other interview talking about recording that one.
Yeah, that's true. So you said that,
But-
we were talking earlier before the set, we talked about, and I asked you if Future Weather had been sort of, a lot of EPs tend to be things that are put out because, there's not the material for a full length or they don't fit well on a full length. But for Future Weather, there was a different story, right?
Yeah, that was intended to be a record. And then, it is a record, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
But it was intended for like the quote-unquote next full-length album. And then those songs, I worked on a lot of those songs. I mean, these guys know. It was like, Dave, how many mixes of Baby Missiles are there? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, worked on those a long time. And then they just kind of like, it was just a batch of songs that we worked on together. And then when those were kind of all felt completed, it was like, well, even if it is only 31 minutes,
it's
what am I
still,
gonna do?
still
like
a whole
stick another
project as a whole, isn't it?
right,
Just to
yeah, I mean,
add
they just
something
all
to fill
work
it out.
together, so.
Yeah, right on. So you have another record in the works that's coming
It's
out
all
this fall,
finished.
right? Right on, and Secretly Canadian, as the last three have been.
Yeah.
So when I listen to your guys' music, the one thing I hear, and this is just, everybody hears music differently, of course, but for me, it's mainly a duality between, I either listen solely to the lyrics, which come out of more of like a folk-based tradition, like the late 60s, singer-songwriter, folk rock people. But then on the other hand, there's also the musical layering and the complexity there that's always really interesting, and I kind of find myself listening to one or the other. But that's just me. I mean, from a songwriting perspective, how do those things kind of come together when you're writing the songs?
Music's usually first, and then they usually always start as demos,
Okay. So instrumental or just
just
a
like
melody or...
starting with some drums or just an idea, and then like the song "Brothers" on the Future Weather.
Yeah.
That was just like me and Dave. We borrowed a microphone from somebody, 414, and kind of mic'd up a trap set, kick, floor, snare, Beta 58 about 6 inches above the snare. 414 about here in comparison to the kick, and actually Dave was playing drums, and it was actually a totally different song. I was strumming, just getting groove down,
Yeah.
And then just kind of one night, just actually did a rough vocal, just kind of on the spot, like with the new set of chords, just figuring out a tune, and ended up actually keeping those vocals. Those were beamed down, and then just added some guitars, and like that's the quickest version of how most of the War on Drugs songs.
Really?
So that one just didn't take as long as the other ones.
So to me, this sort of explains why a lot of your lyrics have sort of a stream of consciousness, flowing nature that fits into the songs really well, perhaps.
Yeah.
I'm drawing conclusions here.
Yeah.
It's the way I hear it. But yeah, I mean, I think those two aspects are fairly distinct and would make your guys' music unique from my point of view. Yeah, for sure. So you're out on tour with The Destroyer right now. That's
Destroyer,
been
most
going well so far.
Yeah,
I hear.
they play awesome, and they're awesome people, and
Yeah.
obviously most of the shows are sold out, which is good for us.
It's definitely good for you guys, and I think
We've toured before where they weren't sold out.
definitely. So the tour is going to go on from here to Chicago, or
Chicago, yeah, and then Pontiac, then up to Canada, back down the East Coast, then up through the Midwest again, and it ends in Calgary. And then we drive from Calgary, we go to Fargo, Eau Claire, Bloomington, and back to
right
Philly.
on. You're covering a lot of ground there.
Yeah,
That's good. That's cool.
16,000 miles.
And then it's back home to write some more music, I suppose, right? Right on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us.
Yeah.
And once again, this is the War on Drugs, live on 88.1 KDHX
Thank
in studio. Thanks again for coming, guys.
Thanks a lot.